What's up guys, Jeff Scala. It's my first video. I'm going to show you guys just a basic Lightroom workflow. So we're working on this photo of my friend Madeline from Boulder Canyon, maybe like a month or two ago. I never touched it, and I've been needing something new to edit since my car is currently broken. So I haven't been able to actually get out and shoot anything new recently, which has been a little bit of a bummer. So I'm just going to show you guys a quick basic Lightroom workflow on this photo. So the first thing that I do in every photo, it's a quick color balance technique. This is the best way that I found to color balance my own photos. So we're going to start with the temperature. Overall with this one, just go by eye, just kind of try to match it up. And it was a warm day, so I want to make it look like that. So typically I'll make it a little bit warmer than I think it should be because we'll be adding a little bit of blue back into our highlights with the split toning a little bit later. So once we have our warmth set, we're going to go ahead and bump our vibrance and saturation all the way to 100. So now we'll go to our tint. It's going to move it right and left. And you can really start seeing, like, as you move it left, you can see obviously to green, obviously to magenta. So as we pull this into the center, we'll pass a point where it almost looks normal. I would say it's right about there. Overall, we're really just trying to balance our magentas and our greens out. Now, so our second step, we're going to switch our photo into black and white. I don't actually want the photo black and white in the end. So once we take color out of that, it becomes a lot easier to see where our tones are, where is it too bright, where is it too dark. So now we've turned our photo black and white. We're going to pull up our exposure until our histogram starts to peak just right in the middle. So it looks like for this photo, that'll be about a plus 50. So go and pull down our highlights. So obviously, if we make our background darker than our foreground, it's going to look unnatural. All right, so now to edit our shadows and our blacks, we're going to zoom into our subject. We can see how as her hair gets darker, it loses all of its details. So the goal of shadows and blacks, just bring that detail back to our photo. I'm gonna pull that up. We're seeing still don't have detail here. And that's really, really dark. So I'll probably be more in our blacks. We're just gonna pull up our blacks and our shadows together. Okay, that looks pretty good right there where we have detail going all the way throughout our hair now. So the last part of this little step is to edit our whites. Typically, I'll pull those down just a little bit. It's never too much. I'm just kind of trying to clip that and overall create a bit flatter of an image. And we have three different ways to edit our contrast. We have the actual contrast slider. We also have the dehaze slider and the clarity slider. First way that I edit contrast, we're going to zoom into our subject and then just slowly increase our actual contrast slider to just get the overall contrast in our image to look a bit more natural and not as washed out and flat. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. So with dehaze, if you have a bit of a cheaper lens, the optical quality is not quite as good, and so you're going to get a little bit of like a gray haze going over the entire photo. If we use the dehaze, we can up that by like 5 to 10. I try to keep it below 10 typically. Sometimes I've taken it above that if it really needs it, but I overall try to keep it pretty low because it can get looking really fake really quick. And then we have clarity, which it's going to affect contrast, but in a much more detailed way. It kind of seems like it's essentially pulling your whites up and your blacks down. Because as we pull this up, we can see how just overall it's going to add a really, really sharp contrast to our entire image. So if you use the contrast slider a bit too much, it's incredibly noticeable. If we drag our cursor over one of these adjustment bars, we can use the up or down arrow to adjust these in increments of 5. If you hold down the Alt or Option key, you can then adjust them in increments of only 1, which is really helpful for really dialing this in. In this photo, just a really quick way, add a little bit of pop. I'll up the contrast by 5 or 10. So it's just going to kind of overall sharpen up my tones Looks like 10 is going to be a little bit much for this photo. Alright guys, so we have two different types of tone curves here. I personally use both of them for different ways. First of all, a region tone curve. This is going to be, it's harder to mess up than a normal channel tone curve. It's easier to use, easier to learn. Overall, if you're just learning Lightroom, or if you're not wanting to really dive too deep into the editing part of this, I'd recommend the region tone curve. It's going to be a lot faster, a lot less precise, but harder to mess up on. So with this, looking at our photo, I can see, okay, my highlights are a bit bright, so I can just drag those down a little bit. And again, we don't want to do too much, but I can drag those down a little bit. My lights, overall, those look pretty fine. Darks I might pick up a bit, and then shadows I'll pick up a little bit more. We can see just with that tone curve, we're not doing a lot here, we're just picking up more detail. Okay, so you can kind of see there, it's not a ton that happens. Sometimes I'll do a few little basic adjustments in this region tone curve because it's really easy. Just pull up your shadows a bit, pull down your highlights. After those basic adjustments, I'll just jump over to my actual tone curve, where first step, I grab my midtones here. They look pretty decent in this. I'll bump them up just a tiny bit. Next, after this, we're going to zoom in on our subject here. We can see that I got her in focus. We can see her individual hair, but for some reason, looking at it, it doesn't look super sharp of focus. So I'm going to show you right now how to sharpen up this contrast in a really specific way. So first step, we're just going to make another point right here between this bottom point and our middle point. With that point, we're gonna pick our shadows, I guess, up a little bit, and then with one more point between those two bottom ones, we're just gonna pull those really dark tones back down. You can see how as we do this, it's going to create a really sharp contrast right where our subject's hair is. Can be kind of hard to dial in. As you can see, it's really hard to overdo it. So just work really slow in this area. Let's see, I might actually pick my midtones up a bit. It's kind of looking like it might look good. Okay, yeah, so I picked up my midtones a little bit more. Constantly throughout editing, I'm always kind of going back, tweaking. If I see something needs to change, I'll go back and tweak it. Okay, so now we're going to go back and switch to color again. First, looking at my photo, it looks a little bit magenta, so I'm just going to put a little more green back into my photo. Okay, that's looking better now. So essentially here we're doing the same thing we did to our shadows, but now to our highlights. We're going to make a point right here, just halfway between the middle point and the top point. Pull your highlights down a little bit, almost typically right around just to that starting dotted line that we have there. And then do one more point and just pull those highest highlights up. And now we'll tweak it. So it looks like overall, I'm going to say my photo's a little bit too bright. So I'll go back to my exposure, lower that a little bit. Okay, I like that more. I'm just going to keep kind of pulling our midtones around. What I'm trying to do here is just match my foreground to the background. Make sure that my background is still brighter than my foreground, but essentially direct the eye to my subject. Okay, so now we're going to start playing with our colors a little bit more. If you scroll all the way down in Lightroom, there's a calibration area. So right here we can target our red, green, and blue channels. First step in the calibration area, I typically will add a little bit of green into my shadows. It looks pretty good right there. This just kind of to help separate our shadows from our highlights using color contrast. So our highlights are already a warmer, they're more yellow and magenta colors. So now we want our shadows to be we're gonna want our shadows to be cooler colors, so blues, greens, things like that. So we'll add a bit of green to our shadows. And now we can go in and actually target our red, green, and blue channels. When I'm editing these, I'll just grab it, slide it to the right, slide it to the left, see what it does to what areas, and then I'll center it, see where it was at, and then just adjust it a little bit from there. Typically, blue primary is going to go down, green primary is going to go up, red primary. I don't really touch it too much because I feel like it affects skin color too much. Let's see, in this photo, I should do it up by like 5. Has a bit of a nice effect there. Okay, and then from there, we'll go to our saturation of each of these. I just pull them down and then up and kind of see what's going to look nice in our photo. Okay, so it's looking like green saturation. I want to go up just a little bit. Ooh. Okay, so you can kind of see how as we bring this up, the skin tone gets really odd looking. So reds, I'll bring the saturation down a little bit and then counteract that by bringing the blues up. So this is really subtle. It just kind of helps dial in the color. Okay, then I'm going to crop this to a 4:5 just for Instagram. Right. Okay, I'm going to put it right there. Reason being, right there is a bit of a line, so I'm going to put that kind of near that third line. And then this third line is generally midway on her. Get that going. Now we're just going to finish this up, a little bit of split toning. I always put kind of an orangish red in my shadows. And then we'll put a kind of a cyan or a lighter blue into our highlights. So you can see just by adding this blue, first of all, that blue color, it's right around that 207 hue number. It looks really nice when it blends with skin. It just gives it a really nice natural look. I think that's about right. Let's see, we'll just tweak our balance a little bit. That'll just kind of focus our colors as to where they're going to go. And finally finish with a highlight priority vignette. I do -100 amount, plus 100 highlights just while I'm dialing it in. And then we can focus our midpoint. Roundness, I'm going to put all the way right because we don't need that in a rectangle. We're kind of looking for a round shape. And then I'll feather that a bit more. Now we're going to center that, bring it down just a tiny bit, and finish. Okay, and then we're just going to do a quick burn gradient to finish this. We're going to want the bottom of our photo here to be darker than the top, so I'll just pull that up. It will overlap her, but we can do a range mask on luminance. Make it really pretty smooth. Now we can kind of pull our highlights back out of this, this burn. A lot of the times on these, I'll also lower the contrast and up my whites and my highlights. Just kind of pull those back out. Gives more of a natural gradient and all of that. Yes, that's kind of my basic Lightroom workflow. There's the photo we started with. There's the photo we ended up with. Hopefully that kind of helps you guys navigate your way through the basic panel tone curve and a few other quick features in Adobe Lightroom.